Fun fact, the development team behind Sonic Adventure 2 frequently received parking tickets, and as a way for the team to silently express their frustrations against the San Francisco Police Department, one stage in particular, titled Mission Street, allows Tails to actually destroy the authority vehicles associated with writing out parking tickets. Now, what's the most logical thing you do when a video game hits commercial success? You make more of it. Sonic Adventure 2. Making sequels to anything makes it exciting. My first exposure was the GameCube version, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, all the way back in 2001. And if memory serves me right, this was the very first Sonic game I played. Sega was recently and unfortunately exiting the hardware business around this time, but 5-year-old me had zero clue. Since I've recently completed Sonic Adventure 1 and was pleasantly surprised by how well it holds up in the grand old year of 2025, I went back and replayed the entirety of Sonic Adventure 2 to see if I was blinded by nostalgia. After all, it has been decades since I've done a full playthrough. Much like its predecessor, the general consensus for Sonic Adventure 2 is that it's generally well received. That's the thing about the adventure titles. They're held in such high regard even after so many years have gone by, and no matter how many current Sonic titles continue to release, people always continue to show love to the adventure lineup. So let's talk a little bit about some of the development history behind Sonic Adventure 2. It was known that a sequel was coming. Sega was failing to meet sales expectations with the Dreamcast, despite them hitting commercial success from the first title, Sonic Adventure. Some tough calls had to be made for the development team, and while the first game had a team that consisted of 120 developers, for the sequel, that number significantly dropped down to the count of only 11. But I am a firm believer of too many cooks in the kitchen, though having a smaller dev team didn't seem like such a bad idea. This would also mark the birth of Sonic Team USA, since this newly founded division had relocated all of its members to San Francisco, California. One of their first projects was the localization of Sonic Adventure for the Western market. Their second project, the highly anticipated Sonic Adventure 2. Some of the main key elements during Adventure 2's development is that the team wanted to expand the narrative on a more larger epic scale compared to the story in the first game. In comes Shiro Maekawa, who pitched the idea of having a substantial part of the game's narrative in outer space, since he was influenced by manga and anime he personally enjoyed during his childhood. Many devs were reluctant, but eventually agreed. Maekawa also took this as an opportunity to flesh out Sonic's personality, since he wasn't very fond of this particular trait. And the team wanted to introduce a couple of new characters, of which would obviously now become part of the main cast in the Sonic universe. Takashi Iizuka ran the idea of implementing a Dark Sonic within the game's story. Concept art was drafted, which appears to depict a less friendly evil version of the blue hedgehog we're familiar with, even going as far as some concepts having only one eye. This concept character at this point in time went by the name of Terios, which is a Japanese word loosely translated to describe illumination or to shine on. The devs felt that Terios' design should not stray too far away from Sonic's design, since they wanted it to shadow Sonic's character. Funny enough, not too long after, it was settled that Shadow was a more fitting name. And hell yes, they made the right call, and with such an appropriate fitting name as it perfectly captures the essence of Shadow the Hedgehog. His character and personality obviously got a bit more fleshed out in the later games. This was also the first appearance of Rouge the Bat. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of information around her conception. Not sure if this is intentional by Sega, since Rouge is technically a spy for the government, but the only bits of information I could find was that early during development, Rouge originally went by Nails. Some sources also state that she went by Shadow as well. Concept art of Rouge from the Sonic the Hedgehog 25th Anniversary art book showcase a multitude of different designs, with Shadow and a date of August 24, 1999 written on the side, presumably when this was drawn. Kazuyuki Hoshino, the art director for Sonic Adventure 2, also stated that he was inspired by, and I quote, the sexiness of Latin women, specifically in this case, Jennifer Lopez. During this time in the early 2000s, Jennifer Lopez was very popular in Japan, so some of her characteristics were used to heavily influence the design of Rouge. Another thing to note, that if it hasn't been abundantly clear yet, San Francisco was also a huge influence within Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic Team USA felt so inspired by their environment enough that many of the levels in-game, such as City Escape and Radical Highway, reflect the streets of San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge respectively. During development, the team decided that they wanted to move away from the different playstyles of the first game, such as characters like Amy and Big, as well as the hub worlds. Instead, in its place, case, every character is now based on 3 specific level types: speed, treasure hunting, and shooting. This was also the first time we got to witness the inclusion of Sonic's iconic soap shoes. Sega and Soap, a subsidiary of the company Heelys, struck a deal on a partnership to have Sonic use their shoes in-game, since it was marketed for the sole purpose of grinding on rails, which is now one of Sonic's main recurring moves in later installments. It was a literal match made in heaven. The partnership just made too much sense not to include it. Sonic Adventure 2 would eventually go on to launch on the Sega Dreamcast in North America on June 19, 2001, and worldwide on June 23, 2001. It would be the last Sonic title for a Sega-based system, since not too long after, the game was ported to the Nintendo GameCube. The release dates for those can be seen here. Now, what about some actual gameplay? How was the game itself held up? After all, it has been over 20 years since I've last fully played it. Before I jump into that, a quick side note. Just like I did for my Sonic Adventure 1 video, which will be linked here, I still have an original copy of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle for the Nintendo GameCube. However, if there's options to show off the game in higher resolution, widescreen, and all that fun jazz, I'm most likely gonna go with that option instead. Let me introduce you to Sega's wonderful efforts of the Steam port of Sonic Adventure 2. And just like the first game, it is a mess that requires mods to restore the accuracy from the Dreamcast and GameCube versions. Thankfully, it's nowhere near as bad as Adventure 1. Some of these fixes include corrections to poor audio mixing, certain on-screen graphics reverted to match their legacy versions, and fine-tuning the controls since the PC port is broken. I'm not a die-hard purist, but I do want the game to reflect the same experience I had when I originally played it. So let's begin. The premise of the game is that Dr. Eggman is out to conquer the world. In this process of world domination, Eggman discovers the diary of his deceased grandfather, Professor Gerald Robotnik. In this diary, Gerald writes about a top-secret military weapon that he had contributed his efforts to, which was conducted on the Space Colony Arc. One of the many weapons that were discovered went under the codename of Project Shadow. Eggman then proceeds to infiltrate the gun facility on Prison Island in order to uncover what Gerald was working on. Lo and behold, that secret weapon is an ultimate life form that goes by the name of Shadow the Hedgehog, a character who has a striking resemblance to Sonic the Hedgehog. He instructs Eggman to meet him at the Space Colony Arc with more Chaos Emeralds, since he wishes to fulfill a promise he made to Maria, Gerald's granddaughter. Throughout the game, Shadow is committing various crimes, which then prompts the police, or Gun, to falsely incriminate Sonic, assuming that Sonic has gone rogue. Shadow's main purpose at this point in time was to fulfill Maria's wish as revenge against humanity by any means necessary. But since Shadow's memory was programmed by Gerald to destroy Earth, we later discover that Shadow eventually overcomes Gerald's brainwashing and fully realizes that Maria's actual wish is to protect humanity, not destroy it. Sonic Adventure 2's gameplay follows 2 parallel storylines, the hero story and the dark story. Each campaign has a healthy amount of levels that are now condensed into 3 different playstyles. You'll see the perspective from both sides as you explore each campaign. For the purpose of keeping this review understandable, I'm going to organize all the characters based on their stage types and review based off of that. This means both hedgehogs, both treasure hunters, and both mechs. Playing as Sonic first, the level starts out with what is, in my opinion, one of the most banger intros to a first level in a video game ever. The cutscene and animation quality are a massive step up from the previous iteration, and you can easily see it within the first minute of the introduction. There is so much personality to this scene, and I swear this is like the coolest Sonic has ever been. Sonic stages are very fun, running away from overly sized trucks in City Escape, evading missiles from fighter jets in Metal Harbor, and swinging on vines in Green Forest. The stages are spectacular. The same could be said for Shadow as well. Sliding down the Golden Gate Bridge in Radical Highway and precision grinding in Skyrail are some of the most memorable experiences I had. Both characters play very similar with the exception of Sonic's bounce bracelet, which the name itself is pretty self-explanatory. This is, in my opinion, where I feel Sonic Adventure 2 shines the most. There's so much love and care put into the level design of these particular stages that exemplifies the speed of these characters, while also not forgetting to mention how incredible the soundtracks are, but I'll get to that in a bit. The treasure hunting stages with Knuckles and Rouge were decent enough. It's about the same level of exploration that you would experience in the first game, but on a larger scale. It wasn't really a problem in the earlier stages, such as Pumpkin Hill or Dry Lagoon. It only started to become a problem when you get to the final final stages where it got increasingly difficult. An important thing to know is that the emerald detector works differently in this game. It is noticeably worse since it now forces you to find them in order as opposed to letting you randomly come across them. Sure, the monitors can give hints and they do help to a certain extent, but in stages like Mad Space, the hints are now reversed, making the exploration go from fun to just flat out annoying and frustrating. This means you have to accurately search in every nook and cranny to find those damn pieces of the Master Emerald. And man, did I let out a big sigh of relief when I finally completed those stages. Also, honorable mention, in Rouge's security hall stage, why the hell did she agree to do it in 5 minutes? Eggman gave you 15. Use them! This stage probably would have been fine had it not been for the forced time limit. Overall, treasure hunting stages were okay. Not bad, but definitely not as good as the first one. The mech stages with Tails and Eggman were surprisingly pretty fun. They addressed one of the main complaints I had from the first game, where I felt it had really poor level design, felt mindless, and overall just too short. The level design in this game is leagues better, and using the upgraded abilities for the mechs, such as the gliding and the bazooka, felt great. Every character in the game has a special unlock ability that definitely helps along the way, and while for some they're not necessarily required to complete the stages, for the mechs they feel almost impossible without them. For example, in Mission Street you can't really get past this part since glide is needed to get back. Thankfully they're pretty obvious to find, so it's not really a huge issue. Dr. Eggman's Cosmic Wall stage stood out the most to me. Using glide within the stage's gimmick of anti-gravity made it enjoyable to play through. I think my only real complaint is that the mechs feel a little clunky to maneuver, as in trying to turn around just feels awful, but maybe that's intentional since you are in control of heavy machinery. Overall, these stages were fantastic. Now, I do want to take a moment to talk about the soundtrack for this game, as I definitely feel it deserves its own spotlight, but my god, the music in this game is immaculate. Sonic Adventure 2 soundtrack is extraordinarily versatile, with the genre of music ranging from pop punk rock of City Escape, early 2000s inspired hip hop rap of Pumpkin Hill, and the badass electronic theme titled For True Story that plays during the encounter between both hedgehogs. The composition of these tracks are perfectly crafted and heavily reflect the personalities of these characters. I think we can all agree, the quality of Sonic games vary from title to title, but there is one thing in common that many Sonic games get right, and it's without a doubt the soundtrack. Words simply cannot express what I feel listening to this. So much love and passion poured into them. It is also where the iconic Live and Learn first debuted. It is, in my opinion, the definitive standout track in Sonic Adventure 2. Back to the gameplay, in each story mode, you'll also go through a variety of different bosses. Some fights against unique bosses tailored to the stages they're located in, while others are simply you going against your counterpart depending on whether you selected Hero or Dark. These boss battles are ridiculously easy, so no complaints here. I do love the face-off Sonic and Shadow have in the Space Colony arc. This boss battle was definitely the highlight for me, especially seeing it from Shadow's perspective. It's almost completely out of character to hear Sonic come off as evil when the race starts. This is also where you fight one of Professor Gerald Robotnik's creations, the Bio-Lizard. This creature was created during Project Shadow, so it's not entirely out of the question to say that this ugly beast might be Shadow the Hedgehog's biological brother. Who the hell would even guess that? Lastly, you'll reach the final boss in the game, which is a variant of the Bio-Lizard, conveniently named the Final Hazard. Sonic and Shadow team up to go against this beast by using the power of the Chaos Emeralds, and it is f***ing awesome. Live and Learn plays in the background while you try not to get obliterated by the deadly lasers coming out of this thing. It's challenging for sure, but not impossible. I also didn't know that you're supposed to go under the Final Hazard to switch between the two characters, since it doesn't really make mention of that. Once you defeat the boss, the game is finally over, and genuinely, what a nice way to wrap up and conclude the story of Sonic Adventure 2. I should mention that there is a healthy amount of post-game content to play, such as the Chow Garden, which has spawned its own community of people who really dedicate their time to raising these characters. You can make them variants of Hero, Dark, or hell, even make them look like you. As you play the stages, it's what those little neon glow sticks are for. They're called Chaos Drive. These energy sticks are essentially what you give to your Chows to boost their stats. As a result, you can compete in tournaments such as karate or racing to win prizes. In the GameCube version, you can transfer these Chao to the tiny Chao Garden in Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance. It was literally like Tamagotchi, making sure that your virtual pet is well taken care of. This Chao Garden in Sonic Adventure 2 was, in my opinion, miles better than the first game. It's a fully fleshed out simulator, and to my knowledge, I'm shocked it hasn't been included in any other Sonic game besides the adventure titles. You can also replay many of the stages with different objectives for higher ranks, obtain all 180 emblems, and you'll get access to a full 3D recreation of the Green Hill Zone stage for Sonic. This was during a time where Green Hill wasn't overly used like in current Sonic games, and was more of a nice callback to Sonic's roots. There's also the 2-player battle mode. I spent so much time playing the multiplayer with my brother growing up. It's essentially a mix of all the stages slightly adjusted for 2 players, with all the playstyles as options to select, so there's a ton of variety. Metal Sonic was my go-to character. He just looks so badass. There's plenty of replayability here, so you'll always have some form of entertainment, and that's basically the entirety of Sonic Adventure 2. Overall, this game is phenomenal. Definitely less issues I had with this game in comparison to the first title. The development team, despite being incredibly small, really set out to make an amazing Sonic game. Maybe one day we'll get remakes of these games so that they're easily accessible for newer generations to play, to understand the hype. They're great classics to enjoy, no question about it. It almost makes me sad after completing both adventure titles and fully realizing this is it. There is no more. Sega unfortunately never released a follow-up. Sure, you could argue that other Sonic titles played similarly to Adventure 1 and 2, but as far as I'm aware, to my knowledge, there is no existence of a game called Sonic Adventure 3. But it isn't all too bad. Sometimes all good things must come to an end, and in this case, we definitely left on such a high note with Sonic Adventure 2.